So I recently watched the new horror movie called The Whistle, and it made me wonder if I'm ever going to get a new good horror movie that genuinely scares me. Instead of these dull stories that feel like a rip-off of other horror movies, boring characters you don't care about, and predictable endings. Sure, there are some good horror movies that came out in recent years, but the crappy ones that are just falsely advertised as scariest movie of the year outweighs them. This made me hopeless, thinking about the good old days of how I felt when I first watched The Conjuring, Sinister, Hereditary, The Witch, movies that are there to do their one and only job, to scare the hell out of you. Movies that will be stuck in your head long after the credits roll, when you walk out alone at night, when you sleep with the lights off, or even when you go to the shitter. Horror that will literally give you PTSD for the whole week. And as a big horror fan as I am, this made me chase that feeling again, until I got the perfect idea. I decided to try out Asian horror movies. Now I'm not completely inexperienced when it comes to Asian movies in general, as I've watched some of their works. And let me tell you guys, those guys can cook. They know what they're doing and they can create some of the best movies to bless your mind. But what I did not watch was their horror movies. I've watched some movies that have a strong horror-ish vibe, but ultimately they are more of a thriller, crime or other genre rather than a full-blown horror movies. So me thinking to myself that I've seen it all and as a brave boy decided to try out their horror. Now, after watching 3 of their horror movies, it was finally time to see if my plan worked. The first movie I decided to watch is called Noroi, aka The Curse in English. Noroi is a 2005 Japanese found footage horror film directed by Koji Shirashi, who co-wrote the screenplay with Naoki Yokota. And I apologize if I mispronounce any names. I'm not exactly the person you call a fluent in pronouncing names correctly, so I apologize for that. The film follows a prominent paranormal journalist named Masafumi Kobayashi, who wrote many books and made documentaries of his investigation into evil spirits, curses, and other supernatural phenomena. But soon after completing his latest documentary film called Noroi, Kobayashi mysteriously disappears. So the movie is basically the documentary Kobayashi worked on. First of all, what really worked on this movie is how convincingly real it felt. This film is the literal definition of when found footage horror is done right. The interviews, TV clips, and amateur footage, they all added up and made me feel like I was watching a real cursed documentary. It all feels mundane and even a bit messy in a way that sells the illusion. That authenticity is the backbone of the horror. Instead of relying on immediate chaos and jump scares, Noroi builds dread through accumulation. Another thing that really works well is how at first the film gives you these multiple unique characters with their own story to tell. And each trait seems like its own mini-case. Nothing screams, this is the main plot, which makes it feel more like a real investigative footage than a scripted story. But then the connection starts creeping in, not in a dramatic twist reveal way, but in a small, almost easy to miss overlaps like names, locations, symbols, and recurring sounds. The film trusts you to notice these patterns before it confirms them, which makes the realization feel earned rather than forced. But don't feel like you have to figure out everything. The movie doesn't strictly expect you to, it just gives you the clues and the chance to do so. Even I didn't realize so many things until everything was revealed in the end. By the time the bigger picture emerges, you will know that the movie is less about shock and more about the creeping realization that something vast and incomprehensible has been unfolding the whole time. Speaking of the bigger picture, that final scene is genuinely one of, if not the most haunting scenes I've seen in horror movies. It is where all the slow, unsettling, eerie and creepy story finally pays off and gives you the final terrifying conclusion. Overall, the main point of Noroi is less about fear in the moment and more about lingering unease. It sticks with you because it feels like something you weren't supposed to see, rather than something crafted to entertain. So even if I wasn't like biting on my nails, the movie gave me some solid scares and a very good story that kept me. The second movie I watched is called The Wailing. The Wailing is a 2016 South Korean dark fantasy horror film written and directed by Na Hong-jin. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce any names. The film centers on a policeman who investigates a series of gruesome killings that started spreading like wildfire in a remote Korean village after a mysterious stranger arrives. This is one of those horror movies that gets under your skin the longer you go on. It started off almost grounded and even a bit darkly funny, but oh boy does it take a serious turn. It slowly turns from basic horror to a way more unsettling truth. This, as Noroi, is a slow-burning movie, but the tension and stakes keeps building up the more you go on, and just when you think you understand what's happening, it shifts away. What I really liked about this movie is how it made me feel unsure the entire time. I was constantly questioning everything because the movie literally proves every theory that I had in mind wrong, to the point that I no longer trust anyone. And that is the main beauty of The Wailing. It not only plays on the scary and creepy side, but also the psychological warfare that gets more and more intense. It delves deeper into the human mind, how fear affects how we think and make decisions. The main character, Jong-gu, is also a really interesting part of the movie. He isn't a typical horror protagonist who is brave or insightful, but a normal family man who ended up in the middle of a terrifying reality because of his line of work. This is what makes the character really interesting and kind of relatable. At the beginning, I was laughing at him for how easily he gets scared and handles the situation, even though he's a police officer. But as the story keeps getting darker and darker, that changes. I start to realize that I would react the same way if I were in his position, if not worse. But typically I would make things go from bad to worse. Like when I was watching the movie, I made plans and decisions in my mind to survive and escape the whole thing. But when the outcome of those decisions gets revealed later, I was done for. Like literally. I would never make it out alive if I was him and would probably die in the first few minutes. The story and the characters aren't just what works for this movie, but it's also visually and tonally beautiful. The atmosphere and vibe it gives off adds more to the story and where it is headed. After the movie ended and the credits started rolling, I was sitting there for a while staring at my screen. My mind couldn't fully comprehend what just took place and how hopeless it made me feel. It really does an amazing job at playing a psychological warfare on you as much as it does on the scare and creepy vibe. And it does it better than any horror movie I have ever seen. There are a lot of things I want to talk about in this movie, but that could ultimately get into the spoiler territory, and I want you guys to get the full experience. Maybe I will make a separate video where I deep dive into the story and meaning because this has a lot of hidden things to talk about. But until then, I don't want to ruin it for some of you who haven't watched it, and I also highly recommend it as it is really good. The third movie I chose to watch is called The Sadness. The Sadness is a 2021 Taiwanese body horror film written, directed, and edited by Canadian filmmaker Rob Jabaz in his feature directorial debut. The film follows two young couples trying to reunite amid a city ravaged by a plague that turns its victims into deranged bloodthirsty sadists. This film, unlike the other two, is not a slow burn. The chaos immediately begins after the first 10 to 15 minutes of introducing you to the main protagonists. First of all, what made this movie interesting is the kind of approach it took into like zombies or people's brain taken over by a virus or fungus. Instead of these dumb walkers just trying to eat your brains, it asks us, what if the infected people can fully think, run and talk, but instead of helping the homeless or helping the elderly cross the road, these maniacs enjoy killing, torturing and doing absolute sadistic stuff. Right off the bat, I must warn you guys, this movie has a lot of blood. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. It is graphic as hell. Not to brag, but I can fairly handle movie gore due to my experience, should I say. But in some scenes in this movie, really did make me feel sick to my stomach. It was absolutely disgusting, but in a good way if you know what I mean.
Stop it. Get some help.
The protagonists are not over the top, but they are fairly interesting. And I also really enjoyed their journey to find each other in this mad and sadistic world. Another good thing I would like to add is the sound of this movie. I don't know what kind of instruments they used, but the soundtracks were absolutely terrifying. They really are to the movie's nightmarish nature. Some of the scenes in this movie are very memorable and genuinely scared me. Like there was one scene where the female protagonist, Kat, was taking a refuge in a police station, and prior to the outbreak, there was one old creepy dude who was just trying to hit on her, but she rejected and embarrassed him. Now after the outbreak, he gets infected, and just looks on her like a guided cruise missile. He just follows her wherever she goes to do unspeakable things to her. Now fast forward to the police station, While she was staying there until things get under control, a commotion ensues between the civilians and the cops inside the police station. And when Kat looks outside, that creepy infected man was just staring at her with this evil grin while holding an axe. I don't know why, but that scene really did get to me. The way they combine scenes like that with the instrumental soundtrack was absolutely peak. Another scene that also got to me is in the first minute of the movie, before the outbreak. That balcony scene was genius. It gave me a glimpse of what is about to come before everything begins. And that is where the movie really worked for me the most. It sets the tone and the atmosphere well in those first few minutes and completely immerses you in the world. The whole movie also does a great job at making the infected feel threatening, like they pose real danger. When I watch most zombie apocalypse movies, I will be like, sure, I could survive that easily and be like Rick or Daryl. But when I watch this, I was like, yep, I'm not surviving that shit. Whenever the infected are on screen, you know the only option is to run away as fast as possible. But I have to mention that there are also scenes that didn't really sit right with me. There was a train scene where one infected man kills off multiple people brutally, and all the rest of the passengers can do is sit down and scream. Like, what? If I were in there, I would have opened that train door like Iron Man and jumped out of there.
One day you're sitting in Paris, you're sitting there having a fucking coffee, and terrorists roll through with AKs, and the person next to you has their brains blown out. You're gonna stand there and be like, waiting to die like a motherfucker. I'm gonna be like, bang, oh, seen that before. Okay, boom, boom, duck and dive in, take one terrorist out, next get the AK, go Rambo, take out all of fucking Pakistan with a G. I don't play games.
They just sat there and watched as the infected man killed randomly before they finally decided to subdue him. Even then, instead of notifying the train drivers or getting to the next cart for safety, the rest of the passengers' reaction was to pull out their phone and record. I mean, in the big 2026, some people would definitely be recording. But a normal person will try to defend themselves or get to safety or call the cops. I mean, anything except sit there and record. Ultimately, the sadness did give me some scary moments and definitely made me turn away from the screen on some of the gory scenes. It was a very good horror movie and I really enjoyed my time watching it. So guys, these are the movies I watched, and to answer that one important question, did I get scared? The answer is yes. Yes, I am proud to say that my plan worked. Even if they didn't scare me to the core, they are still scary and refreshing to watch and take a break from Hollywood's slope. I really enjoyed watching these 3 movies and look forward to seeing more Asian horror movies. But let me know if you have watched some of these movies or if you plan to watch them. If you have any suggestions, comments, or other thoughts related to movies, please leave them in the comments. I would love to read them. I look forward to doing more videos and hope to see you on the next one. Goodbye.